How are you doing? How you doing early this morning?
Yeah, I was listening to Luke, and he's like, I'm seeing still, yeah, yesterday for him, and I'm like, all right, I'm part of that early morning wake up crew, so it's going good. Definitely earlier in the morning than I'm used to, but totally worth it in every sense of the word. So
So Tyler, you were part of our incredible educator trip. Now it's our third educator trip, and we're so committed to these that we've just decided to do another one later this year. So it'll be four total in 2023. Let me ask you this question. Can you go ahead and just introduce yourselves, where you
Mhm.
teach, where you do your work, and then what are you going to talk about here?
Yeah, so hello, I'm Tyler Hanson. I am a social studies teacher and a SJ advisor in Frederick County, Maryland. I teach at Tuscarora High School, which is just off Ballinger Creek Road. Um, so I chose William Grant Still as the person that I wanted to talk about, and I have a number of reasons why. I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen now, or
Yeah, you can. Yep, you got the ability to screen share. They'll make sure
yeah,
that happens. So go ahead and take it over, and I'll just ride along with you.
sounds good. So I chose William Grant Still. He's a famous composer. He's nicknamed the Dean of African American Composers, and
Hmm.
um, there were a number of reasons why I chose William Grant Still. I have some personal reasons as well as some historical reasons, and um, I think for me, this is a composer that not many people are familiar with. And certainly even me, I grew up, as a fan of classical music. It was someone I had never heard of until a class I took when I was in my undergrad. It was a music history class taught by Professor Amy Wodarski at Dickinson College. And it was called Canonical Outsiders. And it was in that class that I really started to take a closer look at representation and whose voices do and do not appear in the history classroom, whether that's music history or any other sort of history. Here I was, right, someone who I'm pretty sure I knew a good amount about classical music. I wasn't an expert, and I still don't, like, as much as I'm happy to teach about William Grant Still. There are definitely people who know far beyond what I do on this person, and I have some references at the end that I can show up. But I here you have this individual who has such a profound influence on the profession and on classical music and popular music even as well in his time, and it's just someone who I never heard of. We actually performed. I was in a college choir among other ensembles, and I actually got to perform some of his music at Dickinson. We had a Black Music Matters concert in the spring of 2016. Um, and so for me, I was so taken by this individual that I actually became the subject of my undergraduate history thesis. Um, the other reason why I chose a musician and a composer is because I think music is such a powerful tool when it comes to the classroom. And so, speaking specifically to my pedagogy, right, whether I use it as a primary source for students to analyze, to look over, to help sort of contextualize a time period, or whether I use it as an opportunity to sort of set the mood for or a feeling of the classroom. Or whether it's something I use in the background as sort of something to use during reflection, right? So I am a big proponent of music in the classroom, and so for me, William Grant still just kind of fit. But as for the historical lens, right? Why is he so historically significant? There are a number of reasons that I think he's important to bring to this conversation specifically. Um, he had a good amount of popular success when he was alive, especially in the early part of the 20th century. Um, starting about during the Harlem Renaissance, and up until, he lives until through the modern civil rights movement into the late 70s. But along with that success came sort of criticism, and it fits sort of the Du Boisian idea of double consciousness, right? For many African Americans, here he is, he's trained in classical music. And so his music sounded, maybe not black enough, or too white or too Western. Some might have called him an Uncle Tom in that community, but for many whites, he's also dealing with Jim Crow and segregation, and he's either labeled too black, right, or okay, we're happy to have you here as like the black representative, but you're just gonna stick in that box that we got for you. And to try and navigate those waters, as a creator or as a musician, right? Like that's very challenging. And so he even more so considering his wife, is actually his second wife, is Verna Arvey, who's also an active musician, a collaborator, and is white. And together, he and his wife, they raise an interracial family, well before Loving versus Virginia. And so they're sort of navigating, a segregated country, as an interracial couple, while he's also gaining a certain degree of success, despite these limitations. In terms of his actual music, he composed and helped produce a wide variety of popular and classical music, whether that's through the blues or working with the Harlem Renaissance. He also, in terms of his classical music, he's writing operas, symphonies, chamber music, vocal music, right? He does so much variety, and kind of touches on so many different fields of classical music and popular music. And, in that sort of journey, he breaks multiple racial barriers, which is what earned him the nickname, the Dean of African American Composers. So, of course, if I were to mention his family, I figured it was apt to show a picture here. You have William Grant Still with his wife, and his children, Duncan and Judith. This is courtesy of the UCLA Library Digital Collections. This is about 1944. But, just from the official website ran by his estate, some of the many firsts that William Grant Still accomplished as an African American. He was the first to conduct a major symphony orchestra in the U.S. He was the first to direct a major symphony orchestra in the Deep South. He to conduct a major American network radio orchestra, to have an opera produced by a major American company, and to have an opera televised over a national network in the U.S. He's breaking multiple different, racial barriers throughout his lifetime, and sort of opens the door. And I think there was one historian that talked about like in a Jackie Robinson-esque way, for the classical music field. So just some other things, places that he appeared in history that just kind of get lost. And I was surprised, as someone who was learning history, throughout a good amount of my undergraduate career, and I hadn't heard, and something that certainly wasn't appearing in my history classrooms when we're talking about these eras. So he served in the pit orchestra for Shuffle Along in 1921. He actually had been working with W.C. Handy, the father of the blues, so there's some popular music influence there. Shuffle Along, for those of you that are aware, is a important I think it's a very important early Broadway production in 1921. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive, it was entirely black cast, black ensemble, and really kind of sets the tone for the Harlem Renaissance. He also works, I mentioned he's classically trained. He actually went to undergrad. His mom wanted him to do pre-med, but he really wasn't into that, but he went anyways, and at the same time was teaching himself music and studying music and whatnot. I actually I think leaves undergrad before he finishes his pre-med degree, but he gets through connections with W.C. Handy and his work in the music world. He comes under the tutelage of Edgar Varese, who's ultra modernist, atonal music, avant-garde, and still eventually kind of leaves that sort of area of classical music. But he through that sort of experience, he kind of discovers his own voice in a way, and he makes himself kind of distinct in a way from what other many new composers are doing, which is distancing themselves from melody and whatnot.
Hey,
And
Tyler, let me
so,
jump in here with a
yes,
question, Tyler. Um,
yeah.
so
Sorry, mhm,
I know, like when you find people compelling, you like
yeah.
you can live in their shoes. I
Mhm,
know. So help me as a
mhm,
surrogate for
yes.
uneducated, uneducated
Mhm.
America. I can be that surrogate often. As a surrogate for
Okay.
uneducated America, to say for us to say, why is this guy, why is this dude so important?
So he opens the doors, and serves as sort of an example. He works with a variety of different African Americans in the Harlem Renaissance. He kind
Mm,
of helped produce. I mean, he's working with Langston Hughes on collaborations. He's working with Bessie Smith. He's working with in Shuffle Along that Josephine Baker. So some really big names. He's kind of in some ways working behind the scenes on those. He is worth in the 1920s. He's worth Black Swan the Black Swan recording label, which is the first black-owned recording label in the U.S. And through that, he's working with names that I think you have become popular household names, but his name sort of become forgotten in a way. And certainly because of his color, when he's working with radio, he has to write under a pseudonym. He has to uh, work, kind of find ways to work around the color barrier in order to achieve success.
Did you
Um,
you said you said that he's kind of seen as the Jackie Robinson of composers?
I mean, that's just one historian's way of putting it in terms of a popular context. Um, it's interesting. I have on here. He in 1939 he uh, writes a song for the World's Fair that's in New York City, or in New York. But even though he's the one who wrote the song, right? He's only allowed to go in on the days that were designated for people of color, or if he had some sort of police protection as he's going in, just to hear his own music in these settings, right? He breaks down, right? I mean, in 1936 he conducts the LA Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl, right? He's conducting his own music, and the first African American to do so with a major symphony orchestra. So he's just breaking down different color barrier doors, much in the way that a Jackie Robinson would. But I think the one difference for me, if I were to critique and I wish I remember which historian it was, but one way to critique it is Jackie Robinson. You know the name, right? Even non-baseball people know that name.
Sure,
People don't
sure.
necessarily know the name William Grant Still. Um, so yeah,
I want to ask.
I'm not sure if
So let
that
me ask
answers
you
the
what.
question. Yeah.
Well, part of my job here is to kind of
Mhm.
uh, be a surrogate for
Yeah.
those who don't know things, and I can function pretty well in that role for not knowing other stuff. Like, 'cause there's a lot of things I don't know, a lot.
Yeah.
But let me ask. So let me, and it's also to move us along. So I'm going to bring in Kimil here in a second. He's going to
Yeah.
join us for a transition. But I want to come back to
Mhm.
this point you made. I believe you said that you performed some of his work
Mhm.
as an undergrad. Is that right?
Yeah, I can actually go to, yeah, the when I was in choir, we did a production, or in the Black Music Matters concert, we did a performance of, or at least an excerpt of, "And They Lynched Him on a Tree," which was released in 1940, which I have, you know, up on the slides now.
Mm,
Hmm.
wow. So
Hmm.
you sang this song.
Yep.
And so I want to ask you a question here
Hmm.
to kind of wrap up your piece here, but to bring it to a very personal level.
Hmm.
I've been a communication professor and American political communication in particular. So when I read the books or the speeches or the writings of people who I just stand in awe of, there's something profoundly that I feel inside when I do that.
Hmm.
Like, so what was it like to perform his music?
I think it. I mean, this is, even though this was like almost a decade ago, which is crazy for me to think of. I think just the moment where it was just a profound, reflection and introspection about, my own identity. And I hear Luke, before me, talking about the perspective of being a white individual,
Yeah. Hmm.
and the work that we have to do. And I think for me, that was sort of a moment of realization of, because the way that this music is set up here is it's the aftermath of the lynching and sort of the reactions afterward. And we only sang part of it, but the original thing called for, two essentially segregated choruses, right? A white chorus that was
Oh,
representing the
okay.
lynch mob, and this African American chorus, and then a soloist that's representing the mother. Just the um, the horrors of what this experience was like, for those. And it was really sort of, it's just an eye-opening experience about, you know whose stories don't get told, and whose stories are tragically cut short. And you know it, it kind of set me on the path, I think, in some ways, looking back, to go learn more, right? Whose voices are missing, whose, um whether that be music, or pop culture, or throughout the history textbooks. I think for me, to perform this piece, it was unlike, especially the lyrics, right? The music, the story that I told was unlike any choir piece that I think I had ever sung
Sure.
before, right? And to have it be so, I think one thing that Catherine Biddle Chapin, who's the lyricist for it, is a poet, um, she, just how direct and matter of fact it just, and that,
Mm,
looking back at some of the newspaper, clippings of lynchings, just how just embedded in the culture it was. And how, I mean, it's almost like it's just a reminder that, okay, we got to, do better. And we need to make sure that we are, people know about this, right? And it took, I mean,
yep.
this music was being composed while there was an anti-lynching bill set before the, Congress, and it passed through the House. And of course there's a Senate filibuster that kills it, right? um it's also, I'm not, not living in a vacuum. This is a year after Billie Holiday's rendition of Strange Fruit is released, right? So there's this
Okay.
pertinent music of this time period, right? That, kind of, sending a message that I think, even coming up on 83 years now, still, resonates in a way, in terms of its historical context. And even, based on my experiences on the trip, I'm thinking about the last museum we went to in Atlanta, the Civil Rights Memorial Museum, and the video we watched there, right, connecting it to the present day. So, um
Tyler, thank you so much for getting up early.
yeah,
All right. And
yeah,
for
yeah.
I have learned a number of things in this time with you, and I appreciate
Yeah.
it. And that that intersection, that interplay between culture
Mhm.
and politics, culture and law, is I just appreciate you bringing it. So thank you so much.